Hi everyone, it's Laura here, and this video is part 2 of a mini-series in which I'm sharing with you how I created a sunset scene using my alcohol markers and stamps by my favorite things. Part 1 is already online on my channel and you will find a link in the description box down below if you missed out on it, and also at the end of this video. There I basically shared how I created the background for this scene, whereas in this video here I'm going to show you how I used the no-line coloring technique to color in the images for the scene. All the supplies are listed and linked in the description box down below, and now it's time to have a look at the coloring for part 2 of this mini-series. The key feature of this scene is the lighting, and here what we have is the sun, which is our light source, which is behind our images. So what we will have are some rim lights around the edges of the images themselves, in the areas of the images that are towards the sun. So for the larger dragon, which is on the left side of the card, we will have rim lights on the bottom and right portions of the image, whereas for the hot air balloon, which is on the other side of the sun, we will have a rim light on the left part of the image and also straight on because it is a little bit lower, so it's almost at sun level. So in order to encode this on my card, so to say, the very first thing that I did was to take a light yellow marker and to use it on all the areas where I thought the light would shine on the images. And only after I was done with this step, I actually went ahead and started adding color to my characters. I started from the largest dragon that I'm going to color with some green markers, and as a first step I basically just coated the entire body with one layer of my lightest green shade, leaving the highlights that I had marked with my yellow marker untouched. And then I'm going to go in with progressively darker markers and I'm going to use those to build volumes on the images, which means I'm basically going to add some shading, and this way I'm going to create dimension. I'm also going to create quite a strong contrast because this adds drama to the scene, and also because we have this backlighting, which means that everything that's towards us, so which points away from the light source, away from the sun, is going to be in a very dark shadow because we have this strong, intense light source at the back. Also, because the position of the light source is opposite to what I usually do, also the shading will be inverted with respect to what I would do if I had a light source from the front. And this is why I'm going to have the more protruding areas be the darkest instead of the lightest ones. They are the furthest away from the light source, and therefore they are the ones where the shadows are more intense. I think one example of this that might be very clear is that back leg of the dragon, where I have the bottom portion, which is the one that's curving away from us but closest to the sun, being the lightest, whereas the top of the leg, which if you imagine it as a 3D image, is going to be the one closest to us because that's kind of a rounded shape. That is the darkest because it's the furthest away from the sun. I really hope that what I'm saying is clear enough for you to understand. If you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know and leave them in the comments down below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Also, I hope you don't mind that I ended up splitting the video in 2 separate parts. There is a lot to cover, and I actually asked on Instagram whether people would prefer the video to be one unique long video or if they preferred me to split it in 2. There wasn't an overwhelming majority, so I had to make the call myself. And I decided to split the video in 2 because I felt this was a solution that would make most people happy. In a way, if you would have watched the 30 minutes video, I don't think you would mind to have the video split in two. Whereas if you wanted the video to be split in two and then you are left with a very long video, then maybe you just don't want to watch it. And obviously that's not what I want, because I want you guys to watch my videos and I like sharing my progress with you. If this wouldn't have been your preference and you didn't get a chance to express it, you can follow me on Instagram, because that's where I get to interact more closely with my followers. So next time I have a question about my videos, it will be there. And if you want to be part of the decision process, the more straightforward way for you to do that is by following me on Instagram. The same principles about shading that I discussed before obviously apply to the face of the dragon too. So the tip of his muzzle will be the darkest part, and also the top of his forehead. And you can see that I have a rim light basically along the jawline and one where there is a curve on his muzzle. Maybe that wasn't 100% correct, but it helped me separate the muzzle from the areas where I have the eyes, because as you can see, the colors there are pretty dark, so I needed to separate the areas a little bit there. I'm also going later on to go back in with a Copic multiliner and I will draw in the eyes, and with a dark green marker I will draw in the nostrils and the mouth. I used some lighter greens to color the bottom of his belly, the scales on his back, the wings, and the little flaps at the side of his head that I suppose would be the ears. I don't know much about dragon anatomy, but let's say those are the ears. I'm again making sure that there is plenty of contrast between adjacent areas to make up for the lack of lines. And I used again greens, but with different tones to differentiate the areas a little bit more. Later on, I will also use some pencils to create more contrast and more texture, because I wasn't really 100% satisfied with the amount of contrast I was getting in these areas. And colored pencils also give you a lot more control, because the tips are so fine that you can really get into all those small areas that might be harder to get in with your markers, although the Illustrator markers have some really fine and precise tips. I haven't mentioned it so far, but wherever I have a highlight with that yellow marker, once I'm done coloring that area, in this case, for example, with my green markers, I'm going to go back in with my yellow marker and blend those areas together, because we do want a defined highlight, but we also want the areas to be blended. It needs to be sharp, but not too sharp. So that's why I am going back in with my yellow markers and blending those areas with the rest of the image. The bulk of the coloring for the larger dragon was done at this point. I just went in with my green markers, and as I said before, I added a bit of detail around the nostrils and the mouth of the dragon, and also there on the belly where I had lost the texture, so the lines between one section of the belly and the other. And then I went ahead and started coloring the little dragon. I think this image is really adorable and is what makes this whole card so cute. For the coloring, I used the same green markers that I used on the larger dragon, and this is because I didn't want too many colors going on my scene. I have purple on the sky, I have my two blue markers, I have my orange sun, and then I'm also going to have some more colors for the hot air balloon, so I thought I would keep things as easy and as simple as possible in terms of color palette, but not having the two dragons colored with different colors. And this also has the effect of tying in the two characters, both from a conceptual point of view and also from the point of view of how the viewer's eye move on the piece itself when they're looking at it. For the hot air balloon, I decided to use some blues. These are not teal blues, are kind of more more of a true blue, if you will. And I decided to opt for this because I didn't want to create too much contrast between the hot air balloon and the background, because the main characters or the main elements of this card are the sun and the dragons. So I'm sorry because there was a little bit of footage missing. As I said, the more I went into the coloring, the more in the zone I was, and I didn't realize that my camera had stopped recording, but I added some shading to the balloon, basically keeping the darkest areas towards the right of the image and the lighter ones on the left of the image, and I also preserved those yellow highlights, which are the sunlight reflecting on the hot air balloon. I used some golden browns to color in the little basket, and then, as I said before, I'm going to use my colored pencils to increase the contrast in the areas that I colored with that lighter green palette, and also to create some texture, for example, on the wings of the dragon as well as on its ears. For that, I basically just drew in some faint lines across the wings to create a little bit of structure there. And I find colored pencils really great to add details to cards that you color with your alcohol markers. I have shown different examples on my channel already. I don't do this very often, but I think it's a great way to enhance your coloring even further. I have said this already, but this is basically another of those cases in which, as I go along with the coloring, I realize that there are areas that need a little bit of adjustments. And so in this case, the clouds were looking too flat compared to the rest of the image. They didn't have a lot of contrast, and I felt this wasn't working really well. So I went back in with the same purple, pink and yellow markers, and I increased the contrast and the structure in the clouds a little bit more. And then to add even more texture to the dragon, I decided to go back in with my green markers and add a little bit of dots, mostly in the shadow areas, and then I blended everything out to make those dots a little bit less harsh. Once the coloring was over, I removed the piece from the cutting mat by first peeling off the painter's tape, and then I added a few more details back into the image, like the rope on the hot air balloon, and also this little rope that I drew in myself, which ties the dragon to the little one in the balloon. This will make sense once you see the sentiment in the card, but before that, what I did is I trimmed down my panel to 4 by 5¼ inches, and then I mounted it on a black card base. But before that, I went in with a white gel pen that I used to create a little bit of sparkle on those water waves. For that, I basically drew in some little dots all over the areas, and in selected areas I also drew some little crosses that mimic light sparkles in a way. They make the whole thing make even more sense, I think. It's a great way to render like sparkling water or even glitter on images, and this is also something that I have done in past cards, but I'm not sure that I have actually shown on videos. To make the rope look shiny, I added a bit of highlights there too, and also I decided to add a few highlights to the images where I have the yellow marker. I just went over those areas with my white gel pen, and then I mounted everything on my black card base, and as a very last step, I glued my sentiment, which reads "You lift me up," in the center of the scene on the bottom area of the card. And I think this card is really cute, and it's so sweet with the bigger dragon that can fly already, helping the small one in the hot air balloon and carrying him with the rope. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this mini series, you can let me know by giving this video and part 1 a thumbs up, and by leaving a comment letting me know what you thought about it. You can also check the description box down below for a link to my blog post and for the supplies that were used to create this card. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe to my channel for more card making and paper crafting inspiration. As always, thank you all so much for stopping by, and have a great day.